Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Chag Sameach. We are right in the middle of the two-day holiday for traditional folks of Shavuot. Last night we had a wonderful time on the Zoom machine, coast to coast and all over the world. We celebrated a Tikkun Leil Shavuot. If you're interested in seeing some of the incredible learning by secular humanistic rabbis that took place there due to the SHJ's wonderful program, and also we joined with Jewish Live, which is an incredible pluralistic platform. You can find it all at the Society for Humanistic Judaism's Facebook page, where they have recordings of it. We're here tonight to celebrate, and so let us begin with our first song, Ma Tovu. Tonight we'll be hearing from Rabbi Denise Handlarski. She'll be talking about her book, The A through Z of Intermarriage. It's really one of the most wonderful books ever written on that, and I don't tell you that lightly because these are not generally wonderful books, but this is an entertaining, fun, and extraordinarily entertaining, informative book. So we'll have the opportunity to hear from her in just a little bit, but we will continue now as we light our candles for Shabbat, and I will invite Arthur, who is sitting next to me, to do that.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, b'Shabbat.
Wherever you are, whatever you have, I hope you'll raise it and wish everyone together a l'chaim, to life, everybody. Tonight being a holiday, we will have some readings that are specifically dedicated to both Shabbat and Shavuot. We continue now. Our ancestors hallowed Shabbat and the holidays. In dark times, they were a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, they provided rest and joy. As a community, we rejoice in the opportunity to celebrate in that spirit, even as we imagine our holidays and Sabbaths anew. May we too find rest from our cares. May we too find meaning in our special days. Let us feel the warmth of love and companionship even when we cannot gather in person, knowing that joy still exists and that our sorrows can be softened by the love that we give and receive. May we be blessed with joy. May we be blessed with peace. May we be blessed with light. And we continue with our song about light, Efo Ori.
Ori, ori, vi, tikvati, tikvati, vi, kochi, kochi, vi, vegam bach, kochi, kochi, vi, vegam bach, where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you, and in you.
On Shavuot, traditional Jews rise in synagogue as the Torah reader chants the most famous of all ancient laws, the Ten Commandments. Tonight, let us, in our own way, recall that tradition with 10 ideas to improve the world. You shall open your heart to all the possibilities of life. You shall value people over possessions and meaning over materialism. You shall speak the truth with honesty and respect. You shall take time for joy and wonder. You shall forgive yourself and others. You shall protect and nurture life. You shall be faithful to those who you love. You shall be generous of spirit. You shall walk in your neighbor's shoes. You shall cultivate gratitude. I thank the Westchester Jewish humanistic community and Rabbi Frank Tamburello for sharing those with me. So as I mentioned earlier, tonight we're going to hear from Rabbi Denise Handlarski. She is a secular humanistic rabbi serving the congregation Orenu in Toronto. She wrote this incredible book. She, for some reason, has a different name for it. She calls it the A through Z of intermarriage, but you can still read it. It's in perfectly comprehensible American English, and I cannot recommend it more highly for those who are both in an intermarriage of some kind or an interrelationship, and for those who simply have friends or want to learn how it's benefited our community, way against what the Shries of Gevalt were. So let's turn now to that interview with Denise. Rabbi Denise Handlarski, my colleague, my teacher, my friend, thank you for joining me. I'm so glad that we have this opportunity. For those who don't know, we were scheduled to welcome you to the congregation on June 5th. And that's yet another wonderful thing we lost because of all this. But we haven't lost the ability to talk together, at least over this medium. So thank you for joining me. And your book, The A to Z of Intermarriage, it's very, one of our colleagues called it sassy.
Yeah,
which I thought was great too, but it's also extraordinarily helpful. What motivated you to start this project?
So I wrote the A to Z. This is what it looks like for anybody who doesn't have it yet. I wrote it because I'm intermarried and I mostly, officiate weddings of people who are marrying across culture. And I also, serve the Orenu congregation in Toronto, which is similar to Birmingham Temple, in that we have many, many families who are intermarried or intercultural, or the kids are the children of intermarriage. And so, these are my people. And I was sick of me and my people getting badmouthed everywhere. But more importantly, I think what was being said with all the badmouthing, the typical narrative about how intermarriage will destroy the Jewish community, dilutes Judaism, people have heard all of these things, I'm sure, for a long time. It's just factually incorrect. It's just not true. And so I wanted something out there that would talk about what people's lived experiences are really like and serve as a bit of a guide for people who are navigating issues in their own lives. So people who are reading the book right now are people who are, getting married or partnered with somebody who is of a different culture or religion than they are. Sometimes people whose kids are intermarrying and maybe they're a bit nervous about it. And also just, I have a lot of readers who are intermarried themselves and have been for a long time. And it's not like they need the guidebook, but it's so nice to feel affirmed, because all the other books about intermarriage out there, even the ones that are positive, sort of are worried in their approach. Like, this is an issue and it's going to be really serious. And I like that someone said the book was sassy. So thank you to that person, because I think we don't have to take it so seriously. We don't have to take ourselves so seriously. So I wrote the book to be helpful, but also to change the conversation, both in terms of content and tone.
When I first came into this movement, it was funny for me to hear people talk about intermarriage as not only something that wasn't negative, but something that was really positive.
Yeah.
Have you seen some of that in your work and what you've written about?
I mean, that's what the book talks about, that I think it is alphabetical. So the A to Z is not just the title, that's the structure of the book. So in O, I talk about O is for opportunity. We have opportunities not only to learn about somebody else's culture or religion, which can be incredibly enriching, but for tons of people who are partnered with somebody who's not Jewish, when they're Jewish, they really explore their own Judaism, because all of a sudden now you have to explain it to somebody, you have to get them on board. So, if you don't know why you celebrate a certain holiday, they're not going to celebrate that holiday. You have to figure it out. And what about this holiday is meaningful? And so I think the opportunity of intermarriage, and we say intermarriage, but it could be, you don't have to be married, anybody who's in a partnership. It's about really exploring your own identity and values, and then bringing those mindfully and meaningfully into your home and your family life. So I think it's deeply enriching.
I like how you talked about the fact that an intermarriage could be between two Jews. That's something else that I had not really thought about until this movement.
That's in the G is for God section. I might just read a smidge of that. I like that it's in the God part because I wrote this for people who aren't just, secular Jews, but certainly I note that I think our approach is a good one. But I say, me as a secular Jew marrying a secular person who was raised without religion, but with cultural traditions around Christmas, is far less of an intermarriage than, say, me as a secular Jew marrying an Orthodox Jew who would expect synagogue attendance, daily prayer, keeping kosher, and so on. All marriages are intermarriages. And I really believe that to be true.
Do you find that an interfaith, really like an interfaith, I mean interreligious kind of situation, is more difficult than an intercultural? I know you talk about that in the book a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I put that section in the G is for God, because it's very difficult to compromise on God. Some people do it. Susan Katz-Miller talks in Being Both about having very different systems of cosmology and how they make it work. And that's great. Those aren't the people I typically serve. Most of the people I serve, and in my own life, God isn't part of the conversation. So it's much easier to get on board with cultural traditions and celebrations when you're not actually contradicting anything that you believe or don't believe. And so it's certainly possible. So I know some people who do intermarriage around religion by saying, I believe this, you believe this, we'll expose our children to both, they can decide. Or, maybe they decide the kids are going to be raised in one particular religion while the other parent celebrates their own way. So people make their own choices, and that's all awesome. But it's not, the majority of the people I work with, they don't have to wrestle with that. When it's about culture, I do think it's simpler.
It's certainly been a pleasure being in this movement that I have less of the theologically weird conversations.
Right.
Your advice to grandparents, and while my grandson is very young at this point, it applies to my children too, was really interesting to me, because my situation is completely different, but I think it applies across the board. Can you share some of that?
So in G's for grandchildren, I say one of the reasons that in-laws get bent out of shape about intermarriage is their fears for the grandchildren. It's a big deal to become a grandparent, and it makes sense that you want to have a say over how the child is being raised. You love and care about them so much. I understand, but I'm here to tell you, butt out. And
There's the sassy part.
yeah, I know it's harsh. I know people don't want to hear it, but this is how I explain it. I tell the story in the book. I presented at a Mood conference in Toronto a couple of years ago, and intermarriage came up a lot in the discussion. It was actually a panel about the Toronto Jewish community, but one of the things we talked about was intermarriage. And a woman approached me after and said, you know, I'm so upset. Ever since my son married out, he doesn't want to come to Shabbat dinner, and it's tense, and I don't know what to do, and they're expecting a child, and I'm really worried about it. How can I make sure this child is going to be Jewish? And I said, you can't. There's no way, nothing you do will make sure this child is Jewish. I said, first of all, stop telling your son he married out if you want his child to be in, you know, and your home has to.
Oh, you froze up there.
Sorry.
We got you back. There you go.
Your home has to be the epicenter of Jewish awesomeness for this child, right? I said, don't make it about guilt and shame. That's going to drive them away. Make it about fun and excitement and learning and joy. You know, the tagline for the book is less oi, more joy. And if we do that, then the grandparents are much more likely to get their grandchildren to identify Jewishly and to celebrate Jewishly, possibly not exclusively. And I know it's hard for people because that's what they want. So in the book, I said, I'm a left-leaning Canadian, you know, secular Jew, and maybe my children will become born-again Christian Republicans living in Texas. I sincerely hope not. But if they do, I will still love them. And all I can do is parent to the best of my ability and give them the values that I think are important. And then what they do with their lives is up to them. And that's always true.
Always true. Yes. What do you say to the people who say, well, this is not a strategy for another generation down the road or down that road?
I'm sorry, just clarify what you mean by this.
For Jewish continuity, that this is, you know, that's great for the first couple, but, you know, what do you do about the kids and the grandkids? You know how the Oigavalters.
The Oigavalters. Okay, so less oi, more joy is always the answer. So, hey, look, maybe that, you know, Judaism will get diluted. I think it will certainly change, as it has changed always, right? And so, you know, years ago, before Paul Golan was with the Society for Humanistic Judaism, he did a talk in Toronto when he was with the Big Tent Judaism and talking about intermarriage. And we had about 75 people in the room. And he said, put up your hand if the way you celebrate Judaism or do Jewish is the same as what your grandparents did. And like 2 hands go up out of 75. And he said, so why should we be surprised if the way our grandkids do it is different from the way we do it, right? And you know, in humanistic Judaism, we talk all the time about how the only tradition in Judaism is change. It has changed many times to keep it relevant, and that's why it's still a thing. So it will change. I don't know how it will change. What I know is you're not going to guilt people into Jewish identity and practice. You can only get people to engage if you make it meaningful and enjoyable. And you offer opportunities for, you know, depth without all the guilt and shame. So, you know, one of the things I mentioned in the book is that the 2 most, you know, strongest narratives in mainstream Jewish life are, number 1, intermarriage is terrible. Why don't, you know, it's diluting Judaism. None of these people should be welcome in our services. And number 2, why doesn't anyone want to come to services? So, like, I don't understand. You know, you have to, if you want people to come, make it good. Just do it well. And I actually think, you know, in terms of the statistics we have on population surveys, both in the US and Canada over the last few years, the children of intermarriage are exploring Judaism. They are interested. And so if we offer opportunities for them to connect in ways that are going to serve them, and we're not assholes to them, A is for assholes in the book.
Great part of the book, right away.
Yeah. Then it will thrive. If we're depending on making sure people don't love who they love for Judaism to continue, then it won't continue. And that's on us as leaders and as participants to make it good.
I love how you put it, and it's important to me too, to say that if it's not meaningful, then maybe it even deserves to go away.
Well, that's what I say. I mean, if nobody's going to miss it, it won't be sad, right? It's sad for us to imagine, but I actually don't share that pessimism people have. I see Judaism evolving and thriving. I think it's much more interesting now than it was 20 years ago. And I think it will continue to evolve and attract new people and serve people in new ways. So I'm actually really excited about it. And that's partly because of the dynamism that has been brought in by multiplicity of culture and experience.
Paul's comment at that conference that you quote, that really struck me as well as I was reading the book, and I loved it. And I have to tell you, just because it's required by Jewish tradition of thousands of years, that in your name I say more oy, less joy. I mean, more joy, less joy frequently, and it was actually the tagline for our Purim celebration.
Oh, I love it.
I did let people know that I stole that from you, or B'Shem Omro,
stickers. So when I come eventually to the Birmingham Temple, I will bring stickers for people, and they can more less oil your stuff.
So just as we're concluding, I know obviously the book was written long before this mess we got into here.
Yes.
But is there some learning or takeaway from it that might apply?
Well, I did, my publisher, so it was published by New Jewish Press, which is an imprint of University of Toronto Press, and the UTP Press blog, they asked me to do a guest blog talking about COVID, but lessons from the books. So I said, look, not everybody's married, but not everybody's intermarried, but everybody needs to work from a place of love. And that's, in the book, I talk a lot, if you're in a relationship with someone, whether that's your partner or your in-law or your anybody in your family, there's love there. So work from that place. But the sort of fun thing that I put in the blog, not that this is a fun time, but, because it's alphabetical and I was trying to come up with 10 letters per word, I was a little stuck with Q. I'm gonna be honest. Q was hard. So I was like, what starts with Q? What starts with Q? And I thought, quicksand. I thought about when you're in a relationship, you're thinking about that sinking feeling, or when you're stuck in something. And so I did an entry on quicksand, and I looked up advice about literally when you're sinking in quicksand, and it applied so beautifully to relationships. And then I think it also applies beautifully to the COVID moment. So I'll just tell you a little bit about quicksand and how you get out of it. Make yourself as light as possible. So I talk about shedding the baggage, what can you let go of here? What doesn't need to get done right now? Or if it's in relationships, how can we as much as possible to make conversations lighter? In real life in quicksand, you're supposed to walk backwards, not forwards. So I talk about walking conversations back. And I think our lives right now is so interesting to me how many people are baking bread. So returning to certain traditions that are in our bodies somewhere. Reach for a branch or someone's hand. So how can we reach out for each other at this time? Take deep breaths. Always good advice. And the last one is to move slowly and deliberately. So certainly I think a lot of us, when this started, we're like, okay, here are my COVID goals, and here's all the stuff I'm going to accomplish. I'm going to learn a new language, and I'm going to have a spotless house. Homeschool my children so they're like Rhodes Scholars by the end of it. And now we're like, if I get through the day and I haven't yelled at anybody and everyone is still talking to each other, it was a good day, right? So we just got to slow down. And I think that if there's one good thing about this moment, which is not a moment any of us would want, it's the invitation to just slow down.
Well, I'm glad that the Q didn't include quarantine. Because then we would have really, I might have rethought my non-theism and non-supernatural and looked at you as my prophet. But
still non-prophet.
you are a prophet in different ways, in the sense that you tell the truth. And I think that the book is an enormous contribution to this entire discussion. It's a fun read. It's the first time I've read about intermarriage that I didn't want to, or at least throw the book against a wall. And it was the advice in there, as you say, it applies to all kinds of situations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This time, stay safe, stay healthy, and the best to you. Thanks for joining us tonight on our little YouTube Shabbat get together. Shabbat shalom.
Thanks, everybody. Stay well.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to spend that time with my colleague. She also taught last night and did a marvelous job with some very both lighthearted and serious topics. The book again is called The A to Z of Intermarriage. You can get it wherever books are sold online. I always like to recommend bookshop.org because that's an organization that's helping independent booksellers to do their work. We will continue now with a song that we frequently do, a version of at the beginning or a version of the end, but I think that in light of us coming together for this holiday, thinking about intermarriage, which is also connected to the book of Ruth and the expansion of our people, let's sing Hine Matov, Behold How Good It Is.
Hine Matov U'Manaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov U'Manaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Behold how good it is when people dwell together, living as one people, hand in hand. What keeps us safe and strong is that we have each other, one human family across the land. Hine Matov U'Manaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov U'Manaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad.
In many liberal congregations, a tradition started somewhat around 100 years ago, maybe a little earlier, to celebrate something that they borrowed from Christian tradition called confirmation. I, for a variety of reasons, do not participate in that tradition, and we can have a conversation about that if you're ever interested. But we do have an incredible teen group that does not stay through 10th grade. They stay through all the way to 12th grade, and then when we have one graduating, we like to honor them at this time of year. Graduating from Cranbrook High School and about to attend Brown University is one of the loveliest, most brilliant members of our congregation, Rebecca Blum. Yes, she's part of the Blum family, as Stephen, Stephanie, and Ryan as well. She is just a joy to know. She has a great intellect, a capacity for awe and wonder that has taken her to see and envision for herself a future perhaps in aerospace, maybe even as an astronaut. She has gone to a space camp, I know at least once, but probably more. And her family, of course, is so supportive of it. She's going to do great things at Brown University. We're very, very proud of her. Arthur can display a book that I brought over to her today. That's our tradition, it being Shavuot, and we're celebrating the book of the Torah, but we're also celebrating literature in general. This is the book that I found for her. I flipped through it a little bit. It is an atlas of our universe, and what a great thing after we talked to Sasha Sagan last week. I'd like to share with you now, as we bring down that photo, just a very short clip from my socially distanced visit to her family's house today to present her with the book.
We're so proud and excited for you, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And oh, you can get them too. Get them too. Wave to everybody because you're going to be on the service tonight. 6 o'clock on YouTube. We miss you guys so much.
Hey, we miss you too.
And I'm so happy to see you in person. All right, you guys. Shabbat shalom and happy Shavuot.
Shabbat shalom. Bye, you
Take
guys.
care.
I wish I could give a hug.
I
Bear
wish
hugs.
too. Virtual hug.
So Mazel Tov to Rebecca, to her whole family. I think she's going to really excel at Brown. Hopefully she'll be able to go in the fall, but if not, there will be many opportunities, hopefully very soon, for that freshman class to stop. There will be a soon opportunity. When you're on live YouTube, I realize it's not CBS or NBC, but if you get tongue-tied, it's not fun. At any rate, we're going to continue with a reading from a previous Shavuot service about peace, adapted by me and written by Rabbi Chaim Stern. Now, summer's prospect, the world ripening and growing softer, the promise of harvest fulfilled, the warming sun lies before us. Now the vision of hope, the world at peace and growing gentler, the promise of goodness fulfilled, the loving heart lies open to the mind. Continue with Nase Shalom.
Nase shalom, shalom ba'olam. Nase shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom, shalom olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn now our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Cece Stone, Joan Mann, Patty Becker, Titus Mendel, Lonnie Fleischer, Karen Tremper Harris, Larry Fisher, Jennifer Breen, Anne-Marie Kersniak, Greg Lowenthal, Alan Mish, and Robert Lee Haber. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the healing, renewal of their bodies, and the renewal of their spirits.
Mekom hakoach betocheinu, mekorot habracha michevrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Mekom hakoach betocheinu, mekorot habracha michevrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
Our thoughts turn now to those who are no longer with us, our loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, I want to say something about someone who died this week unnecessarily. I want to remember George Floyd, a man who had rebuilt his life, a man who had a family, who had loved ones and a community that supported him, co-workers who adored him. What has happened once again in this nation is inexcusable, and that people are out in the streets is understandable. We have a duty and a responsibility to fight racism in this country. I spoke a couple of Rosh Hashanahs or Yom Kippurs ago about Martin Luther King Jr. and his disappointment in so many of the ministers and pastors and rabbis who supported him but kept silent. Loss can come in many forms. We lose people when they're very aged, and we remember them at this time. But some losses are tragic beyond words, and some losses cause anger too. As we Jews have learned to remember and memorialize those whom we've lost to wrongs, let us also remember to memorialize and to learn the lessons from the unnecessary, tragic, violent, and yes, preventable deaths of Mr. Floyd and people like him. Tonight we also remember a hero of a previous pandemic, Larry Kramer, AIDS activist, and a hero to the LGBTQ and to the entire American community. We observe the yard sites of Ayala Fuchs, Shirley Gotthelf, Frida Williams, Esther Zimmer, Tony Klarich, Sarah Morris, Elsie Biederman, Sidney Broida, Eva Cohen, Samuel Cohen, Louis Eisenstadt, Joseph Gelman, Emma Gelman-Polacek, J. Maurice Caro, Ben Magder, Bella Stern, Joseph Stern, Joseph Zickerman, and Howard Kamani. Yehi zichram livracha, may the memories of all of these precious people, each and every one of them precious, provide us with a measure of comfort as we go through our days, and may we learn the lessons that we must from the unnecessary losses. So we're going to conclude tonight with a recording of a special song. The recording's not terrific, I want to tell you in advance, but it's a special reason that I've picked it. When I used to do services with Maria Cimarelli, our former director of music, she would, and this began with my interview here, because I did that as a Shavuot service, she would sing this song that when I foisted it upon her in 2013, she had not heard. This was the most recent recording we could find of it. The song is called Kalaniot. And for those of you who have the PDF in front of you, you don't need to hear the whole translation. You can find that easily. But it is a song that's associated back in the ancient homeland with this time of year because of the anemones, which is what kalaniot are. So the holiday of Shavuot and anemones, these kalaniot, go together so beautifully. And I'd like to conclude tonight with this recording of Maria Cimarelli from a service in 2016, Kalaniot. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Chag Shavuot Sameach, Happy Shavuot, and Shabbat Shalom.
Finish? And broadcast?
Yes.